Hi, I'm Mr. Miyagi and this is Mr. Miyagi's Workshop. Well, just a quick update on the CL360. We got it to run. We're kind of at this stage right now. I'm waiting on some coils and a condenser. I've got a bad condenser on this one, so it doesn't want to run quite right. But that's not what this video is all about. So let's go over and find out what I'm doing today. So we ended up with another 1975 CB360 and we had some problems. This one had sat quite a long time outside, leaned up against a fence with probably we had to move 17 bikes to get to this one here, this 360. And the upper end was froze up. The piston, let me grab one here. You can see that this one here is pretty well scarred up, and it was stuck in the cylinder. Now the cylinder is not too bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through on this engine here. We're going to do. I'm sorry I didn't film the tear down, but trying to get that piston out. Oh my goodness gracious, it was terrible. But we got everything loosened up. But we're going to break this engine completely down. We're going to split the cases and get right into it. But first, I need to make a mount to fit on my original mount that I have for the table. I have a swivel mount. So I'm going to have to make something that attaches right here. And then we'll split the case the rest of the way. So it should be a fun series. Yeah. Randwind Park. Anyway, I just thought I'd let you know what you're in for. So this is going to be a complete teardown. Go through, clean up all this area. See how I'll show you how I do it. I'm sure that there's people doing it a different way, but we'll get this all cleaned up. The case is all cleaned up. We'll split the case. See what the inside of the transmission feels okay, but who knows at this stage. The cylinder is over being in the soaking tank, so I'll be bringing it out and then we'll end up cleaning that up and honing the cylinders. And I did the initial hone through there and they look good, so I'm going to do one more and do a mic in them. And maybe we'll go over that and talk about that too. So this is going to be probably a 2-part, 3-part, 4-part. I'm not sure how long it's going to take to do this. So anyway, stay tuned. So I don't know if you can see down inside that cylinder there. It's not too bad. Let's see if I'm looking at, yeah. This was the right side cylinder, and this is the one, I don't know if you can make it out in there, that one with where this piston was hung up inside there. And so we're going to end up going through honing this cylinder one more time and cleaning up the exterior on it, get it ready for paint. We got to strip off the bottom gasket here, get this all cleaned up. So alrighty, as I always say, let's get to it. So this morning we're going to make a bench mount. I made this plate for the XS650s. This plate bolts down on the table and it uses a bar that just slides in. It's threaded on one end so you can lock it in place however you want to turn it. So this piece here, we got to make adapters so that'll fit on the engine. So that's what we're working on today. We're going to make this 360 unit here, CB360, CL, whatever, to work. So the way it kind of is going to work here is that this is going to get these little tabs that I made up, and all these are just a little L-shaped tab. Let me unscrew it here. Taking a piece of 1-inch bar stock, flat bar stock, and drilled a hole in it so it would accept all thread to slide through the back part of the engine mount, and drilled it and then bent them so that they fit on here. But what I have to do is I got to go over at the grinder and round this out a little bit because it fits a little tight in here. These tabs get welded to the bar itself. This flat spot is going to ride right there. So what that does is it's going to hold pressure down so when you flip the engine over. But one thing that we will have to do is on the back side here. So this piece will slide up, bolt will go through, and there'll be a piece that rides against the back of the case. So you can pick it up, move it, and it will hang that way. It'll hang off of this. So anyway, you'll get to see what I'm doing here once I kind of get everything going. So you can see that we've got this all welded up here, a little wet because I went out and cooled it down. So when this bolt's on there, this piece here rides against the back of the motor, and this piece here rides on this top part, and so that it just fits down in there. Now this is made with 1.25-inch tubing, and which allows it to slide into this 1.5-inch tubing here. This is a 1/4-inch plate that I had laying around, and yeah, the bolt holes and everything are set up to be bolted down on this bench. Makes it much easier to disassemble these motors, because you can slide this in there with this bolted to the motor and then rotate it over and pop the bottom half of the motor off, and then you could look at everything. Kind of holds everything in place. So now you can see I'm bolted down to the table here, and this slides through, and the motor is sitting where you can work at it. You can get to all these bolts along here. There's also, you got to remember, there's one more on this side, I believe. Yeah, right there, that you have to take off. And then there's some of this housing stuff, the shifter and all that stuff needs to be removed. And then you can take all these bolts and we'll pop the top off of this thing and get a good look at the inside. It's a fairly easy system to do. I just used lots of scrap that I had around the shop. Like I said, 1/4-inch plate, probably 8x8, 1.5-inch tubing, heavy wall, and some 1.25-inch tubing, heavy wall that slides inside there. You also want to kind of remember to brace it a little bit so it gives it a little bit more status there. And if you look underneath there, you know how it rests on the motor. And so you can see how this will just make everything a lot easier for taking this engine apart and putting it back together with that style of mount. I'm going to move on to working on the head right now, so let's get to it. We have the head here. Now, you see how crusty that's also what that looked like, and that's what those little wire wheels, soft wire wheels, can do to help clean up. I mean, I cleaned up these caps, and you can see this one still hasn't been cleaned, but I mean, it cleaned them up pretty nicely. And I'm going to do the points cover. I'll clean this all up. A lot of this stuff is going to get painted, but we need to clean it up This all looks good inside on this one here. Even the journals look pretty darn good. The only one that we get to is the valves on the inside look good. This is what we're looking at here. So I'm going to have to clean all this up. But I'm not going to bore you with me doing that. I'm going to go ahead and clean it all up, and you can see what the after effect is. I've got one of these little bronze wheels that I can get down in here and clean out. I even have a smaller one, and I'll get this all cleaned out, and then we'll take the valves apart and take a look at the valve seats and everything and see how everything's looking, and look down in here in the heads and maybe go in there and clean them out with a wire wheel. We'll see what happens here. These are kind of crusty. Same with the exhaust. But we can get this all cleaned up and looking pretty good. I'm thinking that the head is in pretty darn good shape. This journal's a little scored, but I've seen a lot worse. I'll get back to you when I get all of this cleaned up, and then we will take this stuff apart and do some more investigating. The wire brush here, you can see, works pretty good. Just chucked up in my little power drill there. I was able to clean up that valve area quite nicely, and then scrape down where the head gasket goes. I'm setting up here to do the valve removal for the heads. Now you've noticed that little cardboard I have set up there has intake and exhaust for both left and right side. I like to lay all these out in a pattern which they came off of, so when I put it back together again, it'll be easy and everything goes back in the way that it was taken apart. So keep in mind when you're doing this is just to lay your parts out so that you can remember how to put it back together again. So now with the valves removed, we can get in and clean all the carbon out of the valve areas, intake and exhaust area, and then do a real close inspection on seats and everything else that needs to be checked out. All right. Well, it's another day, and I finally got back to working on this. I just want to show you how it's nice to be able, that you could tilt this engine with the mount and everything. So right now I've got it upside down, and I've removed all the screws, all the bolts out of there. There's various sizes of 12 millimeter bolts and of the 10 millimeter bolts, and there's one especially 10 millimeter right here, which I believe is an oil passage. I'm not sure, but the way it seals up on here and how there's a larger opening there, I think there's some oil that gets through here on a passage and whatever. So don't lose that. It's the one with the washer, and it's a real skinny compared to, let me grab one of the other 10s here, and you can see the difference there. It's a little skin, I guess it isn't really a lot skinnier, but it's just the hole is bigger. So anyway, don't lose that, you'll need it. So after you get this all these screws removed, and remember there's one on the top side here, one of those, but it has to come off, otherwise you can't get the case open. Another thing that it's a good idea to do too is to remove your shifter. Now let me turn it sideways here so we can get an idea. Lock this off. So this shifter, you lift this up over, and then it just pulls out. It's a good idea to get that out of the way when you're doing this. You're going to have to remove it anyway. This case sometimes can stick. Now I've already had this off and did some inspection, but there's a couple of tabs right here on the front that you can take, like I'm using my aluminum drift and a hammer, and you can just tap it in the front here, lift up on it, and then you can get in behind here and loosen that up off of those. There's a dowel right here that is in the case. Now I've removed a couple. I've removed the splash guards in there for the crankshaft. These guys right here, they just fit right in there. And there's a rod that holds those in place, pressure down. You just have to push down on the plate next to this one, and you get it down so that this lip will get past, and then it just pulls out, and then you can get to it. You can see that it's pretty crusty in there, and I really do need to do a lot of cleaning. So that will go in the tank today. I will also remove this kickstart housing here, and there's a little snap ring right here that you got to remove, and then everything slides out. I've checked over the bearings on this, and this darn thing is pretty dang smooth. Everything else, the transmission looks good. I've gone through shifting it manually. I'm gonna pull this stuff out of here so I can clean this case really well. And then these will just lift out. Everything was in neutral, so I've got this piece that just lifts out of there. There's a little groove here that fits. This fits into around here that holds that bearing in place, and then this just lifts out. And we have another one of those catch rings right there on this rear cluster bearing. And everything looks pretty good in there. The wear on the forks looks good. So I'm going to remove this one bolt out of here. I'm also going to lift the crank out because I don't want it to fall. And those just come right straight out of there. So with all that out of there, I can tilt this sideways without not having to worry about things falling out. We're going to remove this 10mm bolt, and what this does is this kind of a dog that when you shift your gears, this just locks into place what gear you're in. And there's a spring here, so be careful. So I'm going to lift this up and leave that screw in place so that pops out of the way so the pressure's off. So I'm going to put this in a baggie. Shift rod here just comes out with the shifters. So I'm going to mark these, and then I'll put them in the bag. Now these are slightly different from each other, so I'm going to put that into the shifter area here. On the top part of the case, there's a little detent that you have to remove, and one of the things you have to do, this little bolt mechanism you need to take out, but you also need to, in order to do that, you gotta bend this tab back so that the bolt will turn. So once you get that loosened up, you unscrew this, and there'll be a spring and a ball detent. So there's the little spring down inside. This is the ball bearing detent. Put that in a baggie and it'll pull out. But before you go too much further, you have to remove this little keeper so you can take the shifting fork off. A little paw in here. Let me see if I can get it to come out. Right there. That little item right there. What that does is that rides in these grooves here, so when your shifting fork goes through the mechanisms, it will move it. But this just should all slide out, and I'm going to put everything kind of back together and put it in a baggie. So now we're at the stage here. I'm going to pull these dowels out just so I don't lose them. Those in there. Now the case is pretty well stripped out. So we got to handle a few things this time around. We made a mount for mounting to the table. We've got the engine all tore apart. I was able to get the head looking pretty good. Basically all I did is cleaned up everything and relapped the valves in. Got some of the real crusty looking parts all cleaned up. Of course, we split the cases and got rid of all that, so now I have to soak this, and hopefully next week we'll be able to get into doing a rebuild after repainting everything. But as always, if there's any questions or comments, you can put them in the comment section below, or you can send them to my email address at tmiyagi@hotmail.com. And if you've liked this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget that ringy-dingy button over there for the next episode coming up. So this is Mr. Miyagi saying, you be safe out there, and hope to see you on the road. Ciao.